Shannon. Wow. No text message had ever caused my heart to race before, but this one did. It was simple yet elegant, just like Shannon. She just wanted me to know that she was thinking of me. Suddenly, the grimness that enveloped me when I stepped back into the office disappeared. With the intel that I hoped to gather on Clarissa and Bud in the coming days and weeks, plus my new relationship with Shannon, everything seemed to brighten instantaneously. I wasn't even that bothered when I asked Karen Landingham if Bud was in his office. No, he's gone to lunch now and won't be back in the office for the remainder of the day. I had a feeling that I knew where Bud was right at the moment, and I'm pretty sure Bud knew where I was at all times too, thanks to the GPS. I called it a day right at 4 o'clock and headed straight for the house. The boys were outside playing in the snow and were ecstatic to see me when I pulled in the drive. For the next hour or so, we had a blast playing in the snow fort they had built and proceeded to have a raucous snowball fight. By the time we came in for supper, all three of us were drenched from the wet snow. Clarissa had a minor hissy fit and ordered all of us to strip down and change clothes before we came to supper. Fortunately, I still had clothes upstairs in my old bedroom closet that I could change into, and I made myself presentable for dinner. Clarissa made meatballs for supper, which was always a family favorite. Afterwards, I offered to clear the table to do the dishes, to which she eagerly agreed. "I'm going to draw myself a hot bath," she said. The last I saw of her that evening, she had gone into the bathroom and had taken her iPod with her. I crept up the stairs and looked in our bedroom. To my utter amazement, she hadn't taken her phone with her. I quickly retrieved the external drive and plugged in the USB cable. Immediately, Clarissa's phone came to life and I saw the app being downloaded onto her phone. Within seconds, my own phone buzzed, indicating that I had a text message. The text identified Clarissa's username and password for her phone. Damn, how the hell could Tanya do that? There was no way it could be legal, but I didn't care. The app quickly finished loading and I unplugged the USB cable and set her phone back down on the nightstand where I had found it. I repeated the same maneuver on our family computer and installed the keylogger program. I would have to wait until tomorrow or some other time for Clarissa to actually log in on the computer. But when she did, I would have complete and unfettered access to all of her email, Facebook account, and anything else important. I doubted that she had a Twitter account, but if she did, I would have access to that too. When I finished, I shut down the computer and returned to the family room to play some more video games with the boys. As I looked at the Christmas tree in the corner of the room, I realized that Christmas was only a few days away and I needed to get in gear and get some presents for the boys. Clarissa still wasn't out of the tub yet by the time I tucked the boys into bed. I decided to quit while I was ahead and snuck out of the house, so I didn't have to have another confrontation with her. But before I left, I made sure to grab all of my old work uniforms from the closet and took them all with me to the motel. The next day, I called into work and told Karen Landingham I would be using some comp time in the morning. I decided to take a drive downtown to the local Army or Navy surplus store. I snooped around until I found what I was looking for. I bought several sets and returned to my motel room. I had laid out a freshly cleaned and perfectly pressed uniform shirt and pants. I took what I had purchased at the surplus store, which was several sets of U.S. Army captain's rank, which consisted of 2 vertical silver bars side by side. I pinned one set of rank on the left collar of my shirt and a silver MCSD pin on the right collars, which was the abbreviation for Mason County Sheriff's Department. I then pinned a set of captain's rank on the left and right shoulder epaulettes of my uniform shirt. I finished off my ensemble to fastening my old equipment belt in place, complete with my taser and my Smith & Wesson .40 caliber sidearm. For the first time in months, I actually felt like a law enforcement officer again. I turned a lot of heads when I walked into work after lunch. Chris Hayes was sitting at his desk doing his paperwork from a domestic assault arrest he had made. He looked up at me as I walked by his desk and just nodded and smiled. No sooner had I sat down when my desk phone buzzed and Karen Landingham told me that Bud wanted to see me. So, I thought, the old pig is actually in his office. What the hell are you dressed like that for? I'm a deputy, chief deputy, to be exact, and a captain. I'm wearing a uniform that reflects that. I don't remember authorizing any uniform like that. I don't remember you authorizing any uniform for this position, period, I replied coolly. Bud walked toward me from behind his desk and chuckled. I think I get it. You want to distance yourself from me and get back into the good graces of your fellow deputies? Is that it? Sorry, Patrick. A leopard can't change his spots that quickly. My spots never changed, bud. This is who I am, and this is how I want to represent this position. Go ahead, Patrick. Keep challenging my authority. Every time you do, you just make me feel a little bit less guilty. Very funny, bud. I didn't think you had it in you to feel guilty, period. I turned around and left. I decided I wasn't going to let Bud ruin the rest of my day. As fate would have it, I got a text message at that exact moment from Shannon. Just wanted to wish you a happy Tuesday, for no particular reason, and to let you know you were thought of today. Be safe, Shannon. I wrote back, know that I think of you, as well. Your slightest touch could heal me in the hospital, and your words can lift my spirit when I'm down. Patrick. I looked up from my phone to see Bud Roberts glaring at me from his office door. I smiled and held up my phone for him to see. He immediately came charging into my office and asked me what the hell I was so cheery about. Because I finally decided that I'm not going to get all screwed up over you and Clarissa, Bud. Because I have finally figured out that you can only ruin me if I let you. And I'm not going to allow you to destroy me, Bud. Oh, yeah, he chuckled. And just exactly how do you think you're going to do that? I have my ways, Bud. I have my ways. And I also have someone in my corner who has given me the strength to deal with this. I'm not going down without a fight. You'll lose, Patrick. Clarissa is mine now. You need to get used to that fact. Maybe I'm not even talking about Clarissa, Bud. Maybe I've accepted the fact that Clarissa and I are history. But just because I've accepted that fact doesn't mean that I've accepted the idea of you and Clarissa just riding off into the sunset, Bud. You need to stop jerking her around, Patrick. This whole stupid facade of you going home at night to play daddy and husband just to keep up pretenses with your kids has got to end. I've been patient with you to a fault, Patrick, but my patience is wearing thin. Just remember one thing, Patrick, inevitability. Whatever I decide to do is inevitable. I've got a hell of a lot of ammo I can still throw at you to bring your house of cards tumbling to the ground, Patrick. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface yet. Well, I said, fortunately for me, I actually have begun to scratch the surface, Bud. It's been like peeling an onion one layer at a time, one day at a time. It might take a while to get to the center, but eventually I'm gonna get there. And at the center of it all is the truth. And I've made it my mission to see that people get the truth. About me, about you, about everything. Bud stood up and grew even sterner. Don't make me do it, Patrick. I can really, really hurt you in ways you don't even know about. Think of your kids in the long term and what they'll think of you. They see you as a hero now. But if you piss me and Clarissa off anymore, I will make them so damned ashamed of you they'll never want to leave the house again. They will absolutely dread showing their faces in school. I rose from behind my desk. And you, Bud, really need to think about how far you're willing to push me and whether threatening me over my children is a good idea. You told me to remember and accept what is inevitable. I'm telling you, Bud, to remember the unexpected. You just never know when a cornered animal will strike, and you never know when something comes out of left field to bite you right in the bum. Bud turned to leave my office. It all ends, Patrick. The games with Clarissa. Everything ends right now. You and her are officially separating. Get it through your skull and get your boys to deal with it. Because if you don't, then I will. I really wanted to flip him off before he left, but I could see others watching us. It was becoming increasingly apparent that the tension between me and Bud was palpable and visible, and people were starting to wonder why. I didn't worry about it much as I went to the house that afternoon, but judging from the surprised look on Clarissa's face, it was obvious that she had spoken with Bud. Clarissa told me that she didn't have dinner prepared for tonight and that she would need to run to the store to pick up a few things. I told her that it was fine and that I could manage with the boys if she wanted to head to town to the store. As she pulled out of the driveway, I immediately logged on to our home computer. I activated the key logger system and, in no time at all, quickly obtained her email username and password. I also got her username and password for her Facebook account and for another one called Snapchat, which I had heard of but didn't know much about. Soon, I was perusing literally months and years worth of emails between Clarissa and Bud. I continuously clicked on all of them and forwarded them to my own email account. I then quickly erased my activity by emptying out the sent folder on her account as Tanya had instructed me. The sheer number of emails was overwhelming, and I had no idea how I would go through them all. There were probably 600 or more emails over the last 2 years. When I logged onto my own email account, I saw a massive amount of text messages that Tanya's program had forwarded directly to my account. I was still amazed that she could do that, but she seemed incredibly smart. There were over 11,000 text messages from the last 2 years. The texts started out fairly innocuous, but I was amazed at how more and more brazen and flirtatious they became quickly into the affair. Soon, they were downright more adult in nature, and they began talking about taking their affair from the cyber world into the real one. Within a month of when they started texting, it appeared they had. It made me wonder exactly when Clarissa got her prescription of her low-T treatment from her physician and how long she had been lying to me about it. The emails didn't turn up nearly as much evidence as I would have hoped, and what little there was turned out to be mostly mundane. Oh, there was some flirty stuff, but not nearly enough to be a smoking gun. The only juicy emails between the two of them occurred between Clarissa's email and Bud's personal email account, not his work-related one. But Tanya had assured me she would have a fix for that, and so I saved each of them and forwarded them onto my personal account. The overwhelming bulk of their correspondence was via text. I stayed up the rest of the night reading through text after text. I skipped most of the text from the first year or so and picked up again from about 6 months ago, just shortly before I got shot during the kidnapping. Bud became both brazen and cryptic about what he had planned for me. From the sounds of it, I had been exactly right. Bud had indeed planned on me going down for the count and going down hard. I called in sick to work the next morning and decided to just stay at the hotel going over as many of the texts and emails as I possibly could. It hurt like hell to do so, reading a chronological timeline of my wife's affair with my boss, but I determined to steal through it and find some way to completely screw both of them in the bum. One text in particular caught my eye. Bud had mentioned to Clarissa that he had all the evidence he would need. He had typed it in quotes to highlight it. Clarissa responded to the text, asking what he meant by that, and Bud had elaborated some more. He told Clarissa that he had a sure winner in Jeff, and that I would never appreciate the irony of it. He further went on to say that he had a chain of evidence that would ensure that I would never be able to challenge his authority in this entire screwed-up situation. Sure winner. Chain of evidence and Jeff. The only thing he could have been talking about was Jeff McCauley. Jeff McCauley was technically an employee of the Mason County Jail, but was also in charge of our property and evidence room. I decided that I needed to explore those avenues and see what they turned up. If I was right, then Bud's attempts at being clever and cryptic weren't that good. God, that son of a bitch had an ego. I placed a quick call to Tanya Fulbright to ask for another favor. She picked up after the first ring. Hey, what's up, Buttercup? Never expected to hear from you so soon, she cooed. It was like talking to a long-lost lover, only way more awesome and sexy. I hope I'm not bothering you. You've helped me so much already that I don't want to impose any further. Oh, my God, Patrick, you're not imposing at all. I've always got time for one of Christopher's hot, sexy coworkers. It isn't often that I'm at a loss for words, but I was. Big time. I would have to have her expound on that last statement sometime in the future. Well, Tanya, I was wondering if you knew how to do a background check. I mean, like a really deep background check on someone. Patrick Quinn, she scolded me. I just recently helped you install illegal software on your wife's phone and computer to access multiple layers of highly encrypted software and hardware to help you data mine a treasure trove of personal information from your wife and her lover, who also happens to be a sitting elected public official. I think I can handle something as trivial and mundane as a background check, she giggled. Yes. Well, when you put it that way, I suppose it sounds like I'm underestimating your abilities. Yeah. No shit, you're underestimating my abilities. Lucky for you, you're so damn cute that I'm willing to overlook your transgression. Might have to be a penalty for your mistake in the future. I was intrigued. And what kind of penalty would that be? You might have to put in some hard time. Know what I mean? She cackled mercilessly. She knew exactly what she was doing to me. Well, you, Chris, and I can negotiate a payment plan in the future. But for now, I just need some essential information on a key employee of the Mason County Sheriff's Department. Ooh, sounds sneaky. Who are we talking about? Dear Patrick, his name is Jeff McCauley. He is technically a jailer who also runs our property and evidence room. Okay, give me a sec. I could hear her beautiful black polished nails tickling a computer keyboard in the background. Okay, I got him. What all do you want to know? Well, what have you got? I have one Jeffrey Malcolm McCauley, DOB June 27th, 73. Resides at 834 Lincoln Street. Has a wife Marissa and 2 kids, Cicely and Tyson, ages 16 and 13 respectively. Wife is employed at Wells Fargo Bank as a teller. Only known civil issues are just a couple of old traffic tickets for both. Nothing else stands out on the criminal side. Damn, dead end. Something told me deep down that Bud had the screws put to Jeff to make him play ball. Somehow, Jeff was tied in with Bud. He had to be. Bud had some kind of leverage over him. But if not criminal, then what? Financial? Hey Tanya, see what you can dig up on Jeff's financials. Can you do that? God, Patrick, are you trying to insult me? Wow, I'm gonna have to think of something really good to punish you now. I could only imagine what that might be. And it could only be awesome. Work your magic, Tanya. I need a miracle here, you know? I know, Patrick. You know I'd do anything to you. For you, she giggled. She was merciless. And I loved it. Okay, I got it. Holy shit. I sat up in bed. What? Holy shit, what? Jeff and his wife have a mortgage on their house for about $55,000. About normal for the part of town they live in. But Jeff has 2 credit cards in his name that are totally maxed out. How much is on the cards? Jesus, she said. One card is maxed out at $60,000 and the other is tapped for another $35,000. I let out a long, slow whistle. Can you dig deeper and find out where it is all going? Give me a sec. I gotta get into the MasterCard system. I didn't even want to know if that was legal. After about 30 seconds, she came back and asked, "Where the hell is Canterbury Park?" I thought for a minute. Canterbury Park. I want to say it is a horse track over by Valley Fair Amusement Park, south side of the Twin Cities. Yep, it sure is, Tanya confirmed. I'm looking at the website right now. I dunno, Patrick. It looks like our boy Jeff has a hell of a gambling problem, because both credit cards have been completely maxed out on cash advances from Canterbury Park. That's it. That was totally it. Bud Roberts had Jeff McCauley by the balls. Even the mere appearance of anything that might be used to sway Jeff McCauley's influence would be enough to automatically remove him from his position as property and evidence supervisor. All anyone had to do was know his situation and they could easily bribe or coerce him to do anything they wanted, considering he had nearly $100,000 in gambling debt. Bud Roberts should have removed him immediately as soon as he found out. But the fact that Jeff was still there meant Bud was using him for sure. Tanya, you are absolutely amazing, and I'm gonna make good on my promise to you and Chris. You have my word on that. You haven't promised me shit, Patrick, but I can think of plenty of ways for you to make it up to me. I said, sheepishly, I'm not sure Chris would appreciate that. Chris and I have a very liberal understanding, Patrick, and an extremely mutual, yet open, relationship. We just have to agree on who we play with and be completely honest about it. And I'm thinking that a little rendezvous between you, me and Chris might just be therapeutic for us all. Just think about it, Patrick, and keep an open mind. That's all I'm saying. I'll do that, Tanya. I chuckled. I promise. Thanks again for all your help. Bye-bye, sugar pie, she said, hanging up. It was time to pay a little visit to Jeff McCauley down at Property and Evidence. I made a miraculous recovery the rest of the afternoon and evening and presented to work bright and early the next morning. As luck would have it, Bud Roberts had only 2 meetings scheduled that morning and then planned to be out of the office the rest of the day. Typical for a Friday. I was preparing 2 civil warrants to be delivered later that day when I looked up from my desk around 10:30 and saw Bud Roberts leaving. He was on his phone and leaving in a hurry. As he got into the elevator to head downstairs, he looked at me, smiled, and then flipped me the bird as the elevator doors closed. I guess that told me all I needed to know about where he was headed. Shortly after he left, I paid a little visit to the Property and Evidence room. Jeff McCauley stood about 5 feet 6 inches and about 180 pounds. He wore his hair in a bad comb over to compensate for a growing bald spot, and he sported an oversized porn mustache to compensate for his loss of hair and a profound overbite. He never quite had what it took to become a deputy, but he had, for the most part, always been fairly well-liked and regarded by everyone in the department. "Good morning, Jeff," I said nonchalantly as I arrived. "Captain," he said, somewhat startled, "this is a surprise. What brings you all the way down to P&E today?" "Well, I'm still getting used to a lot of my new duties as chief deputy. And, as you know well, one of my actual duties is to oversee property and evidence. So, I thought there was no better time than now to come down and go over the property and evidence logs to see how they are kept and whether they are up to date. As you can see, I brought the property and evidence SOPs with me, and I thought you and I could have a chance to go over them and make sure everything is as it should be." Jeff's face visibly paled, and he suddenly appeared nervous. "Well, I've been in this office for 5 years now, Captain. I can assure you that everything is shipshape. Bud's never had a single complaint about me the entire time I've been here. No doubt, nor should he, I'm sure. But as I said, I'd like to go over the logs and kind of do my own eyes-on inventory to make sure what we have actually matches the logs. I'm sure you understand that." I could sense Jeff shifting his weight. His right hand was very slightly but visibly trembling. His breathing rate quickened. "Well, Captain, the logs and inventory are completely computerized now. I just finished the last weekly inventory just this morning. I can show you the results right now." "Great. Go ahead and print it off, and we can go through the arms room and evidence room ourselves and visually verify it." Jeff froze in place. He was obviously petrified. "Something wrong, Jeff?" "Well, Captain, it's just that I already finished the inventory and I was going to knock off early today and planned on taking some comp time." "That's funny," I said, faking confusion. "I'm sure you know that payroll and paid time off requests come through my office, Jeff. I never saw any PTO request from you this week. You do know, of course, that they need to be approved at least 24 hours in advance." Jeff just looked away from me and was breathing fast and hard through his nose. I decided to torture him a little further. "I'll tell you what, Jeff. Let's burn through a quick inventory, and then I'll let you take the rest of the day off. How's that sound?" He didn't bite. He just stood there not knowing what else to say. I decided to lay down my trump card. I stood directly in front of him and looked him straight in the eyes. His bottom lip was even starting to tremble. "I know, Jeff," I said in a low voice. "I know about your extreme credit problems. I know that you owe nearly twice as much on credit cards as you do on your house. I know that you spend almost every weekend in Minneapolis at the track and that you lose profusely. I know that you're at the breaking point and you're going to soon be in danger of losing your job, your family, and your home. And I know that Bud Roberts knows all of this, too, and is holding it over your head to get you to help him screw me over." Jeff immediately burst into stifled sobbing and sat down at his desk with his head in his hands. "I can help you, Jeff," I said, pulling up a chair. "But you've got to help me, too. And you can start by telling me exactly what it is that Bud has you doing for him. And you can't hold anything back, either. You got to be 100% straight and true if you want me to help you, Jeff." It took Jeff several minutes to get himself under control. Finally, when he did, he wanted to talk. "Captain," he started. "Call me Pat," I said. "Okay, Pat," he continued. "You say you'll help me. I gotta know that ain't just a comment. I need you to promise me on everything you hold dear that you will help me. You understand?" I leaned in beside him and put my hand on his shoulder. "Jeff, look at me." He did. "You have my word, and I promise you on the life of my children that I will do whatever I can to help you, including keeping me out of jail." Jesus, I thought. What in the hell did Bud have Jeff doing? "Jeff, I don't know what all you and Bud are mixed up in, but I promise to do my best to keep you out of jail. I can't promise you that you will not go to jail, only that I'll do my damnedest to keep you out of there." Jeff dried his eyes, wiped his nose, and nodded his head. "Well then, Pat, I guess we better take a little ride. I'm gonna bring a few people along, Jeff, just for posterity's sake." "Probably a good idea, Pat." I called in Danny Larson, Chris Hayes, another female deputy named Angel Ryerson, and one of our lieutenants, Benito Ben Villanueva. I didn't know most of our lieutenants that well, but I knew Ben better than the rest. I wasn't sure how he felt about me being captain now, having passed him over, even though he never applied for my position. But I needed to take a shot in the dark. Ben was probably one of the most well-liked and trusted members of the department in general. He was the picture of polished professionalism in all matters, and he was an extremely good officer and a very fair shift supervisor. I needed to trust that he would put any personal animosity beside at this point and focus on the problem at hand. Jeff had assured me that what Bud was having him do would absolutely blow my socks off when I found out. I felt that such a premonition warranted having some additional witnesses. I told everyone to meet me at 4 p.m., just after the afternoon shift change. I made sure that Jeff McCauley never got out of my sight the rest of the day following our morning encounter. I ended up driving Jeff and myself back to the Skyline Driver Motel where I retrieved my F-150 crew cab, as I had already made sure that Bud was not tracking my personal vehicle with GPS. Then I told everyone else to follow me and drive their own personal vehicles, but only after Chris Hayes and I did a precursory check to ensure that no one's vehicles had any GPS tracking devices planted. Danny, Angel, and Ben looked at us as though we were insane, but they went along with it. Then I insisted that everyone take out their personal and department-issued phones and remove the battery, rendering them useless and untraceable. There was some general bitching, but they did as I had asked. Jeff and I jumped in my truck and Ben, Angel, Danny, and Chris all rode in Ben's Chevy Silverado. We drove to the northwest part of Red River Falls near the new industrial park. Jeff had me stop at a complex of storage sheds that were part of Red River Rentals. We all proceeded on foot to unit number 189. Jeff produced a single key for the tamper-resistant padlock on the roll-up door to the shed. "Remember," Jeff said, "remember what you promised me, Pat. And remember that none of this is my fault." "Open the unit, Jeff," I commanded. Jeff proceeded to unlock the padlock and flung the roll-up door open. He pulled the string to a single light switch that illuminated the room. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. There were storage shelves along the west wall of the shed running the full length. Sitting on those shelves were numerous white paper bags and white paper boxes, all sealed with red tamper-resistant tape. Doing a quick scan, I estimated that there were over 80 bags and boxes of evidence sitting on those shelves. "Holy Jesus," I said aghast. "My God, Jeff, what the hell have you done?" "What the hell?" Angel said. "Is that what I think it is, Pat?" Danny asked, incredulous. "Oh my God," was all Ben could say. We all proceeded to walk into the shed as a group and stare horrified at the boxes and bags of evidence that had been surreptitiously removed from our secure evidence lockers and transported over 3 miles to a remote rented storage facility in a very bad part of town. There were boxes containing clothing, weapons used in assaults, weapons used in murders, assault collection kits, and all other forms of material and criminal evidence in over 80 cases. Some of the evidence was from cases that were ongoing. Some was from cases closed 10 years ago. Danny just stood there, shaking his head in disbelief. "My God, Jeff, what the hell have you done?" All I could do was just stare at the wall of evidence and imagine my life slowly vanishing away, one white box or bag at a time. I wanted to scream, so I did. Holy shit. Look, Pat, I can't even begin to overstate how immensely important it is that you shut the hell up right now, Jeff. McCauley just stood there, head hanging down. "Jesus, Pat, do you know what this means?" Angel asked. "Bud had me between a rock and a hard place, Pat," Jeff pressed on. I said, "Shut up, Jeff. Look at that wall, Jeff. Look, do you see what I see? I see years and years worth of evidence that was illegally taken from a secure evidence room and transported miles away without proper authorization or documentation. Do you know what that is called, Jeff? Do you? It is called evidence tampering. There are over 80 cases worth of evidence on those shelves. Jeff, do you know what that means? It means over 80 cases of evidence tampering. It means that a whole shitload of really messed up and shitty people could get released from prison because of you, Jeff. It means a 10-year prison sentence for each count. Can you do math, Jeff? Do you know what 80 times 10 is, you stupid prick?" Jeff hung his head and meekly uttered, 800. "Yes, that's right. Apparently you aren't as retarded as I thought. 800 years, Jeff. That's how long I could potentially go to jail for. It's effectively a death sentence, you moron." I began to pace the room like a rabid, caged animal while the others just stared at the wall in disbelief, horror, and shock. How the hell did you get it all here? Chris wanted to know. My personal vehicle, came Jeff's sheepish reply. How were you able to sign it out? Angel demanded. Bud used Patrick's electronic signature. He was able to get it somehow from our IT guy, Dean Strobe. Bud signed it out and made me deliver it here. Pat, can I have a word alone? It was Ben Villanueva. As always, he was a voice of reason. We walked outside into the cold about 100 feet from the entrance. Pat, you got a real mess on your hands in there. You want to explain to me what the heck is going on in there? Ben, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. I realized he was right and I needed to let everyone in on what our collective boss was trying to do. Ben and I walked back into the shed and I gathered everyone around. I spent the next 15 minutes giving them all the Cliff Notes version of the events and what had led up to this point. I also spent a few minutes explaining Jeff McCauley's role in this, much to his dismay and shame. To say that Ben, Angel, Chris, and Danny were shocked would be a phenomenal understatement. They all knew that Bud Roberts was flamboyant, cocky, and a little arrogant. But until now, they had all liked him and liked working for him. Now they understood just how much of a scumbsucker he could really be. So what do we do now? Angel asked. Simple, I replied. The evidence has to go back in place and right now. Not that simple, amigo, Ben said. I'm going to assume that it literally took weeks for Jeff and Bud to get all this evidence moved out here. I mean, there are several murder investigations in here, most of which are closed. This whole process is going to get them new trials, get the perps sprung from jail, and is going to bring disrepute on the entire department and the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. There is no way to keep a lid on this, Pat. Or was there? I cast a look over to Chris Hayes. He was thinking the same thing I was and answered my thoughts with the words, child's play. Tanya could easily fix this situation and revert the records back to the time before the evidence shuffle took place. He quickly explained to the group what Tanya's capabilities were and how quickly she could do it. A quick phone call from Chris to Tanya sealed the deal, and she agreed to meet us at the sheriff's office as soon as we had everything loaded. Ben, Angel, and Danny all implored me to just cut my losses and report everything to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. I, in turn, implored them to follow my plan and return all of the evidence to the sheriff's office tonight, scrub the records, and make sure that chain of custody remained intact. I said that we couldn't risk letting 6 convicted murderers go free or any of the other bad people who were in prison right now because of this evidence. I assured them, as did Chris Hayes, that Tanya was as good as they come and she could have the records reverted to the way they were before the evidence was taken out of lockup, so long as there weren't any hard copies anywhere. Jeff McCauley assured us there were not, that the entire system was now digital, which explains why Bud was able to get away with it by stealing my electronic signature. Reluctantly, they all agreed. It was getting dark out, and we would have the cover of darkness to help us in our retrieval. Before we got too far along, Jeff reminded me of the deal we had made. You promised you'd help me, Pat. I'll do everything I can, Jeff, but I absolutely will not allow you to be in control of the evidence room anymore. But Pat, no buts about it, Jeff. It's not an option. I'll keep you employed, and I'll do whatever we have to in order to get you help for your gambling problem. But there is no way you'll ever be in charge of the piano again. I'll talk to Bryce Evans and get you switched back to the jail full-time soon. But all of your passcodes, passwords, and access to the armory and evidence rooms are getting revoked. You will not have access to anything down there without the presence of me or one of the other deputies here. The only thing you'll be able to do on your computer from now is play solitaire. Jeff was about to say or moan his disapproval, but a stern look from Ben dissuaded him. The stupid shit was just lucky to still have a job and not my foot in his bum. He was also damned lucky not to be going to jail either. Tanya met us at the sheriff's office and immediately started to work on the electronic records. It was well after 8 p.m. by the time we got all of the evidence loaded in the back of my truck and transported back. Jeff was at least good about making sure the evidence all went back into its proper spot on the shelves in the evidence room. By midnight, Tanya had finished reversing all of the electronic transactions and had even managed to access Bud Roberts' email account and scrub the electronic copies of the transactions that Jeff had previously emailed to him. There no longer was any electronic trace of Bud Roberts' massive attempt to frame me for over 80 counts of evidence tampering. Thanks a million, everyone, I said to the group, and especially to Chris and Tanya. This is the second time you guys have bailed me out. I have no idea how I will repay you all, but trust me when I say that I won't forget this. Ben, Angel, and Danny all shook hands with me before they left, but I could tell that they were all extremely uneasy with being burdened with such a huge secret. I assured them all that if it ever blew up, that I would absolutely shoulder 100% accountability. As far as I was concerned, this was now strictly between me, Bud, and Jeff McCauley. I went so far as to verbally threaten Jeff with his life if he breathed a word of this to anyone. Chris? Tanya? Can I chat with you guys a minute before you leave? Sure thing, Tanya chimed. What's up? I really hate to bother you. You've both done so much for me already, but I'm wondering if I can push the bounds of our friendship a bit further by asking for one more favor. What kind of favor? Chris asked. Same lines as before. Only this time I need an ace in the hole. I need to have a backup plan in case Bud Roberts decides to fight me on this. I don't want to be the one standing without a chair when the music stops, if you know what I mean. I see where you're going with this. You think there's more people in on this whole thing than just Bud Roberts, Chris deduced. Oh, I know there is. I just need to figure out how to get some leverage on this person to get him to go to bat for me instead of Bud. How good are you at snooping around on a person's personal computers if I can get you the IP addresses? I could do it in my sleep. Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr., Tanya cooed. Who are we going to spy on, Mr. Bond? Both of their jaws dropped when I told them. But the game was afoot, and they were both in it to help me win it. I was the last one of our group to leave the sheriff's office that night. As I got back to my F-150, I replaced my phone's battery, turned it on, and saw that I had a text message that had been received several hours ago. Bridget and I are free this weekend. Any chance we might get to see you? Oh, hell yes, there was. Suddenly, the anger and frustration of the last 12 hours disappeared. It was pushing 1 o'clock in the morning, but I still replied. Me and my boys are planning on making a day of it at the sledding hill. I think it is time we took Bridget out and see how the new toboggan works. I figured I'd get an answer from her in the morning, but my phone vibrated again just as I pulled out of the lot. I paused and read her message. OMG, she will be ecstatic. I'm coming too. Mom and Dad will probably show up to take pictures. Can't wait to meet your boys. Suddenly, I wasn't sure what to think about introducing the boys to Shannon, but then I realized that, if things kept going the way they were now, they would more than likely be meeting Shannon at some point. I couldn't help but smile at the thought. I quickly thumbed, "It's a date," to which she replied. Yet again, for the umpteenth time, I pissed off Clarissa by showing up bright and early to pick up Nick and Jake to take them to the sledding hill. We had gotten an additional 10 inches of snow earlier in the week, so I was sure the sledding hill would be busy. My phone started buzzing just as I was getting ready to leave. I glanced at it and saw that it was none other than Bud Roberts. I silenced the call as the boys loaded their own sleds into my F-150 and I headed out the door after them. I was too anxious to see Shannon and Bridget and didn't even care about Clarissa's bitchy comment as I left the house. It would be nice, Patrick, if you thought of other people than just yourself once in a while, she hissed. You are seriously going to regret this, mister. Big time. Oh, get over yourself, I retorted. Remember what I said? Maybe you and Bud aren't exactly holding all the cards anymore. Remember that. When you don't have much left, you don't have much to lose. You might want to think about how dangerous that could be for you. God, please, Patrick. If you had any way out of this by now, you would have done it already. You're just a gutless windbag, Patrick. And a chicken. I should have dumped you but a long time ago. And she slammed the door shut behind me. Fortunately, neither of the boys heard our little exchange. And, fortunately for me, I was able to keep my mouth shut and my cards still close to my chest. Besides, nothing was going to ruin this day for me. We arrived at the sledding hill right around 9. Shannon and Bridget were already there waiting for us. Bridget ran over to me, and I scooped her up and bear hugged her. My boys were both a little confused at my obvious affection for the little girl until I explained to them who she was and why she was special to me. Shannon was impressed with the boys and said she couldn't get over how handsome they were. The boys both blushed, but still took in the flattery for all it was worth. Nick and Jake immediately took Bridget into their embrace and proceeded to take turns sledding down the big hill and helping her make her way back to the top again. Shannon and I stood at the top of the hill watching them all, each of us nursing a cup of hot cocoa from the small snack stand that was only open on the weekends. "I wasn't humoring them, Patrick," Shannon said. "Your boys are very handsome. They totally favor their father." I stood close to her and briefly took her gloved hand in my own and said, "Thank you. You don't know how much it means to hear that. And you have no idea how much I've been looking forward to seeing you again." "I was hoping so, Patrick. But I have to say that you look tired and extremely stressed. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, bowing my head. "It most decidedly is not okay. You wouldn't believe the last 48 hours of my life." "Try me," she said. "I'm a nurse, so that makes me as good a listener as any bartender," she chuckled. We sat down at one of the park benches where we could still keep an eye on the kids. The boys were doing a marvelous job of playing with and looking after Bridget. It took me a few minutes, but I eventually recounted the whole story. I told her about Jeff McCauley and his position at the department, his financial and marital problems, about his massive gambling problem, and how Bud Roberts was using that to try and completely screw me over. "You have no idea, Shannon. I just can't believe he would go that far. Bad enough that he wants to steal my wife from me. But prison? He was going to make sure I went away for a long, damn time. My God, Patrick. Is there anything you can do? I mean, you have all the evidence, right? Can't you just go to the state police and have him charged?" I explained to Clarissa how doing so would open up every case related to the evidence, and how some very bad people would almost certainly go free. Every piece of evidence that was removed from P&E related to cases I had been involved with from my time at the Red River Falls Police Department to the last couple of years I had been on the Mason County Sheriff's Department. But the state attorney general and his prosecutors would almost certainly review the handling of every piece of evidence in our evidence room. It would almost certainly invite retrials of over 2,000 criminal cases in the last decade or more since Jeff McCauley had been running the P&E office. And, if retrials were ordered, none of that evidence would likely be admissible, given the possibility of chain of custody being breached. But you know what the worst part is, Shannon? Could anything possibly be worse, Patrick? Oh yes. The worst part is that Bud would have ruined me in my son's eyes for the rest of their lives. My sons would have finished growing up thinking I was a common criminal. Nothing I could ever have said to them would have meant anything. Any fatherly advice would have just been empty words from a criminal. They would have grown up and become men, and I would have had absolutely nothing to do with it. If they became good men, it would have been in spite of me. If they grew up to be bad men, it would most certainly have been because of me. I would have been better off dead. Shannon embraced my right arm and put her head on my shoulder. "Not as long as I'm around, Patrick. I'll make sure that never happens." I was just about to lean in and kiss Shannon when I noticed that Nick, Jake, and Bridget were all standing at the top of the hill, ready for their next run, and were staring at us. "I'm just cold," Shannon said. "I hope you don't mind me hugging your dad. He is nice and warm, that's all." The boys both kind of smiled sheepishly and Bridget just giggled. And then in a flash, they all three disappeared down the hill again. I took the opportunity to steal a quick kiss and said, "Nice save." At that moment, Shannon's parents both arrived at the bench we were sitting at, cameras in hand to take pictures of Bridget sledding. Shannon stood and embraced her mother, followed by a hug for her dad. I stood, too, on ceremony and extended my hand to both parents. Suzanne shook warmly. Jack gripped my hand, too, but there was a strange look on his face. I could tell he was eyeing me warily. I wondered if maybe he had seen me kiss Shannon just moments before. He said very little over the course of the next hour or so as we all watched the kids sled. The most reaction I got out of him was when he looked at me as I was looking at him and simply gave me a nod of his head. He then returned his gaze to his granddaughter as she continued sledding with the boys. Suzanne and Shannon sat in the middle with Jack and me sitting on opposite ends. The two ladies chatted enough for everyone. Suzanne spoke with me just long enough to tell me how impressed she was with my two boys, and I thanked her. I finally got up and excused myself so I could take a couple of turns sledding down the hill with my boys and Bridget. Bridget was all excited and insisted that I ride with her. The boys both preferred to ride solo. Anyway, and were getting big enough that 2 riders on their sleds was a bit much. I had a blast sledding with Bridget. I really did. Shannon just sat there, and she and her mother both beamed their smiles in delight. Jack, however, just sat there stoically. It didn't happen that day, but I knew that a time would come when he would want to have a serious talk. I didn't know how much he knew about my personal situation. Maybe he didn't even care. But I hoped that he wouldn't crucify me over it, and would at least understand my side of things. At the very least, I hoped he didn't take anything out on Shannon. He didn't strike me as the type of man who would, but you just never knew. Shannon was Jack's only child. She and Bridget were the 2 things he cared most about in the world. We broke up the sledding party around 12:30 as the kids were all starting to get hungry. I was too, and the boys started harping on me to take them out to lunch. Bridget immediately chimed in with stating very loudly where she wanted to go, and the boys agreed. "Okay, I guess," Shannon said. "Looks like we're taking the sledding party to McDonald's." We all piled into 3 separate vehicles and spent about an hour at the restaurant eating and visiting. Even Jack and Suzanne came along, which Shannon said was a big deal as her father hardly ever eats fast food. I sensed Jack came along more to keep an eye on me than anything else. I was good and mannerly and didn't even sit next to Shannon. I more or less watched the kids eat and then watched them play together on the indoor play set. Nick was getting kind of old for that and usually didn't play anymore on the rare occasions when we went to McDonald's. But he continued to eat up the attention that he was getting from Bridget, and he and Jake had fun playing with her. I couldn't help but smile to myself and think how awesome big brothers they could be to Bridget. Perhaps someday in the future, I thought. After lunch, Shannon invited everyone back to her place. I decided to take a pass on that and told her that I had promised to take the boys to a movie that afternoon. I figured I had probably worn out my welcome with Jack and didn't want to push it. I sensed that Shannon figured it out and gave me an all too brief hug as we left. Of course, I had to give Bridget a big old bear hug and promise that we would do all of this again real soon. Even the boys and Bridget exchanged hugs, and we left. We did take in the theater that afternoon, a double feature. In fact, my boys were usually up for going to see a movie, and I let them each pick out a show they wanted to see. So we gorged some more on popcorn, snacks and sodas at the theater, and grabbed more fast food to eat on the way home that evening, as it was supper time by the time I got the boys home anyway. As I pulled my truck into the driveway, I could see another obvious set of fresh tire tracks of a vehicle that had pulled in earlier in the day. As we got in the house, the unmistakable smell of Bud Roberts cologne still hung in the air. Clarissa stood at the entrance to the kitchen looking smug. She could tell that I could smell the cologne and cocked her head to the side, arched her brow and said, "Something wrong, Patrick?" I just shook my head, hugged each of the boys, and told them I would look for them in church tomorrow. They now understood that I wasn't staying there full-time, but hadn't asked much more than that. At least not to me anyway. And at least Clarissa had the decency to not whore herself out to Bud when the boys were around. I swore to myself that if that ever happened, there would, in fact, be absolutely nothing to stop me from strangling Bud Roberts or putting a bullet in his head. The thought alone enraged me. And yet, I was almost terrified that I was now certain that I could get angry enough to really hurt or kill someone. I pondered the thought as I drove back to my dilapidated hotel. My misery was exchanged for determination as I turned on my laptop and began reading through more text messages and emails between Clarissa and Bud. Sure enough, the most recent texts were from today. Clarissa, "A-hole just showed up, took the boys. No call ahead, nothing. Keep screwing up my life. You need to fix this shit. Bud, trust me, babe. On this shit. Be cool, though. He'll be looking for my left jab and get knocked out by my right hook. Clarissa, he never showed up last night. Didn't answer his phone. His cruiser was at the office last night when boys and I went out to eat. Still there at 9 when we went home. What do you have him doing? Bud, not doing anything special I know of. Saw it on my GPS, drove by too, and checked it out. His office light's still on even. Guessing he just there as now he has nowhere else to go. We'll look into it though. Clarissa, you need to look into me first, lol. Mama's getting feisty. KWIM? Got an itch needs scratched, lol. Bud, I scratch yours if you scratch mine, lol. Clarissa, I lick yours if you lick mine, lol. Bud, be there in 20. I couldn't stomach reading anymore and just shut off the computer. So, Clarissa knew I was at the sheriff's office until late last night. I'm sure that would elicit some questions from Bud in the coming days. Fortunately, Christmas was coming up and Bud was going to be taking almost 2 weeks vacation. After next Tuesday, we wouldn't see him again until after the first of the year. It was now 9:30 p.m. All of a sudden, my phone vibrated with a text. It was Shannon. Munchkin is down for the count. You totally wore her out today. Want to stop by for a late glass of wine or two? Now it was my turn to text. Be there in 20. Actually, by the time I freshened up and pulled in front of her little house on Front Street, it had only been about 15 minutes. Hopefully, Shannon wouldn't see this as a sign of eager anticipation or desperation on my part. But then again, why in the hell would she invite me over for wine this late at night? Maybe our connection was strong enough that we could just bypass the pretensions. One can only hope. I knocked lightly, knowing Bridget was in bed. Shannon opened the door and stood in front of me dressed in a set of two-piece plum-colored velvet pajamas. I stepped inside and removed my coat and hung it on the hook. Hello, gorgeous, I said as we fell into our embrace. Hello, handsome, she replied. Our lips met again in a red-hot kiss, and I knew immediately that things were going to pick up right where they left off from our last scorching encounter. The feel of the velvet PJs was exquisite, and immediately my hands began exploring completely on autopilot. We continued to kiss as I ran my hands all over her back. The response of Shannon's body told me that absolutely nothing was off-limits, and every inch of her begged to be explored. The sex was amazing. An hour later, we had repeated our earlier escapade and again lay in each other's arms, sweaty and completely spent. It was now just after midnight, and I could start to feel the Sandman start beating me over the head. Patrick? Shannon said, can I ask you something? I got the feeling that she and I had been headed for a talk at some point, most probably about what our future together was going to be like. Absolutely, Han. You can ask me anything you want. What is going to happen when everything between you, your wife and your boss, comes to a head? Well, I said, taking a deep breath, to tell you the truth, I'm not quite sure. At this point, it will be a small victory just not to go to jail. Other than that, keeping my job, at least until I can find something else, will probably be my next priority. Is there a part of you that wants to take Clarissa back, even after everything she's done to you? Moment of truth. It was all right there in front of me, black and white. There was no shade of gray. A few weeks earlier, before I had really gotten involved with Shannon even a little bit, there was no doubt that I would have done anything I could to save my marriage. My boys, I felt, deserved at least that much. Now, I realized that staying in a marriage just to give my kids some semblance of normalcy would probably appease them in the short term, but would be more damaging to them in the long term. Shannon, I want you to know something, I said, looking deeply into her eyes. I don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now, 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 months from now. And I sure as hell don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. The only two things I know at this exact moment are that I'm happy. I'm happy right here and right now. At this point, that is enough for me. And the other thing you're sure of? You said there were two. I kissed her deeply. The other thing I'm sure of, Shannon Sullivan, is that there is no way in hell that I could even remotely think about taking Clarissa back, even after I dropped the bomb on her and Bud. Even when I know for a fact that there will come a day when she begs me to, I will not have her as my wife anymore. So, where does that leave us? Only you can answer that, Shannon. But I swear to God that I will be in your life as long as you'll have me. And with that, I was rewarded with another deep and passionate kiss. Shannon and I made love one more time that night before falling into an incredibly deep and peaceful sleep, still wrapped in each other's arms. I didn't want to, but I got up around 6:30 and snuck my way out of the house. Shannon kissed me so many times as I was leaving that I was afraid I wasn't going to get out of the house before Bridget saw me. The sad part was that I didn't want to leave, but I was now on a mission. I spent Christmas Eve with Nick and Jake and took them out for a nice supper. We attended an early Christmas Mass at St. Matthew's and even got to spend time talking with Shannon and her family afterward, although, as usual, Shannon's father Jack didn't have much to say. Then it was back to the house to open presents. We had the house to ourselves that night, and I didn't even bother asking Clarissa where she was going. I didn't care. She was going to get the boys all to herself on Christmas Day, and spend a few days with Caroline and Martin in the cities. It had been a bit of a kick in the gut when Clarissa hadn't even invited me to spend time with them at her mother's new place in the Twin Cities. But on further reflection, it was obviously for the best. Normally, I would have spoiled Clarissa pretty good at Christmas, but not this year. I took the money I would have spent and added it to the amount I spent on the boys. As a result, I pretty much spoiled them rotten. Clarissa was ticked, nonetheless, and even chastised me for not giving her a gift just to keep up some sort of appearance for the boys. But considering we didn't even spend Christmas Eve together, it was just another sign of how self-centered and batshit crazy she was becoming. Maybe she had been all along and I just missed it. Love will do that to you. Knowing that Bud was going to be off work until after the new year, I set to work really finalizing my plans on protecting myself and getting a fair measure of revenge. I called it Operation Bitch Slap. I took no small amount of comp time and even called in sick a couple of days around the holidays while Bud was gone. Not much was happening at work anyway, so I figured I would work from home. I absolutely scoured the home computer while Clarissa was away at her mother's celebrating with the boys. I had all of the information I needed. It was now just a matter of organizing it and prioritizing it to make the best use of the information. Chris and Tanya were the biggest help in that regard. We scoured through and read thousands of emails and text messages going back almost to the beginning of Bud and Clarissa's affair. The phone records documented nearly 2,000 phone calls between them during the same time frame. Bud hadn't called me directly even a fraction of that number during the time we've been friends, or since I'd been working for him as a deputy. Once we got most of the information sorted through, we were able to paint a picture of just exactly what Sheriff Bud Roberts' overall plans for me had been, and what he was truly willing to do to get rid of me and obtain possession of my wife and kids in the process. 1. Elmer Suggs. Bud's intention was to get Elmer to file a much-belated false arrest claim against me and try to get me for some additional police brutality as well. With everything that I had done for Elmer over the last couple of months, and the fact that the local veterans had done everything they could to keep Elmer away from Bud, I felt pretty good that I was in the clear on Elmer and he would now take my side, regardless. Mitigated. 2. Fiduciary concerns. As chief deputy, a lot of the day-to-day financials of the department were handled by me. Nothing major, really. Most of the expenditures were pretty cut and dried. But although the bills were getting paid, Bud had shuffled over $10,000 of department money from one account to another. There really was no rhyme or reason for it, since all of the bills got paid and there was no actual loss of money. The transactions, using my electronic signature, were simply to make me look suspicious and like I had something to hide. Since some of the bills were paid from accounts they shouldn't have, it did make me look like kind of a screw-up. Fortunately, fixing all of the old transactions was child's play for Tanya, and she quickly had all of the transactions reversed and had the electronic records show that all financials were handled from the proper accounts. Mitigated. 3. Embezzlement. Bud Roberts had also shifted an additional $3,000 from the department's incidentals account to an account opened at our local Wells Fargo branch. The incidentals account is basically a fancy name for petty cash, but it was an account that still had to be tracked with all receipts. It only receives an allotment of $15,000 a year. The Wells Fargo account, however, was opened in my name, of course. Once again, Tanya was a lifesaver and completely reversed and eliminated the entire transaction. The account was still active in my name, but now carried a zero balance. The only reason the account was left open was because there was actual paperwork that would still show that I had opened the account, regardless of Bud Roberts' attempt at forging my signature. The bank president, a friend of Bud's, and I would have to have a friendly chat when this was all over. That was the only way Bud could have opened an account in my name, since a department electronic signature would have been useless. But since all transactions are now electronic and digital, there would at least be no trace that money had been transferred from the sheriff's department to that account.